Today we're going to talk about banking transactions and saving money. Now, one of the things that we need to be able to do is understand what types of savings that we have, right? So if you understand when you're making money, right, sometimes you're earning more money than you're spending on a regular basis. Now, the reasons why we save that extra cash is to spend on things like burgers, cars, and trips, right? Now, some things that we can do with this surplus money that may help you in the future. You could save for a car, you could pay for college, or you could pay for an apprenticeship, okay? Now, what does saving and investment mean, and what's the difference? Now, when you save, you're saving monthly, and it means that the monthly kind of sits in your bank account, doesn't get a lot of interest. But then when you invest, your investment is actually invested in things like bonds, stocks, or GICs, right? Now, when you hear the term of a bond, think of a bond as an IOU that is between you and a company. After a certain amount of time, they give you a certain amount of money back as a percentage increase. Okay, now, when you talk about stocks are just pieces of a company that you own, and the value of the stock will increase, which means that you will increase your savings. Now, these investments, these usually take a minimum of 2-year commitments in order to get an interest. Okay, get interest, i.e. a return. And the interest return on these things are anywhere from 2 to 10%. Now, when we talk about savings in a regular bank, a bank literally just gives you a little bit of money for the amount of money that you put in. So they're usually giving you anywhere from 0.02 cents to 1.3% interest, which isn't a lot of money. Okay? Now, I'm going to explain something to you. Okay? We have this thing called compound interest. This is a concept that I want you to kind of understand. Now, here's what I want you to imagine. Imagine you got $3,000. You put that money into a savings account, right? And for some reason, your bank has decided to give you 3.5% interest every year for 5 years, right? Now, in order to calculate this is how we do it. So the principal is the amount of money that you start with at the beginning of each year, okay? Now, if you look at the column, if you look at this part, year, so at the end of year 1, we end up with this amount of money. Now, the reason why we get that amount of money is because we take 3,000 and multiply by the 3.5% to get $105, which means we have $3,105, right? And now we take that $3,105 and we imagine that it starts out in our bank account at the beginning of the second year. And that is $3,105. So we literally just transfer this amount of money to the beginning of the next column in our table here. Then we take 3.5% of this amount of money, and that's our interest that we earn at the end of the year for leaving our money in the bank account, which gives us this amount. And we do that so on and so on for 5 years. And if you look at the very bottom corner here, right? The bottom corner tells us what the total amount of money you'll have at the end of 5 years. And this is the total amount of money that I'm going to make after 5 years. Now, this column here tells us the total amount of interest that we made on our initial investment of $3,000. We literally just left the money in our bank account for 5 years, and we got 3.5%. Now, this is how a GIC works. A GIC will give you will say, if you give us $3,000, we'll give you 3.5% interest over 5 years. That is how it works. Basically, you think of a GIC, a guaranteed investment certificate, as a savings account for which you lock it in and you can't touch it for 5 years. But after 5 years, if you leave it, you end up with this amount of money at the end, with $63.05 interest total that you made based on your original investment of $3,000. Okay, so I just want you to be familiar with this, and if you ever see something that's called compound interest or GICs, this is how it is calculated. So I want you to be familiar with the top 6 ways to save money and make money in a bank. The first thing that we have is a savings account. Okay, a savings account has higher interest than a checking account. Okay, now the biggest problem with this type of checking account is that you can make less withdrawals compared to what we had when we were dealing with our checking accounts. Okay, now for a checking account, we already looked at that earlier when we were doing our banking transactions. The pro is that you have more withdrawals and deposits per month that you can use, right? Now, the con is that we have a way lower interest rate that's provided for you by the bank. Okay? All right. Now, for a guaranteed investment certificate, the guaranteed investment certificate works like that problem that we just talked about. Think of it as a savings account with a higher promised interest rate. Okay? Higher interest rate. And what happens is, the con is that the money is locked in over a certain amount of time. It could be from 6 months to 5 years. It's locked away and you don't have access to it. If you pull your money out before the amount of time that you agreed to leave your money in there, the bank keeps the interest. Very horrible thing. Now, another thing that we have is a thing called mutual funds, right? Another way to save and invest is mutual funds. Now, mutual funds, these things invest in many companies. So remember how we were talking about stocks? These are pieces of a company that you own, and you get money from them every month or every year or every quarter, right? Based on the profits that the company makes. The pros is that, right? As long as you leave it in there for a long time, it's fine. The con is that you got to leave that money in there for quite a long time. But there's also the possibility of losing money sometimes. Okay? Now, when you hear the concept of a thing called a bond, right? A bond is important in the sense that you invest in a single company or a municipality. Now, a company in Canada can also be a municipality. Now, what they're looking for is a loan from you. Think of it as an IOU, right? And that IOU has a high interest rate because they want your money for a long time. And they will give you that money if you leave it with them for, say, 3 years, 6 months, whatever, and they give you a high interest rate. Very similar to what we talked about in the previous investigation. The con. Yeah, the con is when you have a bond, these things here aren't like our guaranteed income certificate, which guarantees that you're going to get your income, your percentage increase over time. This one, sometimes those bonds don't make money, but at least you'll get your money back. Okay? Now, the last thing is stocks. The con for stocks is that the value changes with the market. Sometimes the market is doing well and the stock goes up. Sometimes the market is doing badly, or the people that are out there think that the company is doing badly and everybody sells their stocks at a very low rate because they don't want to lose money. And you lose money in that way. right? The pro is that sometimes some of these companies are making really good products and you end up making lots and lots of money. All right, now let's talk about the main concept of today. It's called the interest rate. Now, when we talk about simple interest is something that I want you to kind of understand, right? Simple interest is applied to the principal, the starting amount of money, right? And it's called simple interest, right? The I value, so the basic simple interest calculation is how much money am I going to have to tack on at the end of my investment, right? How much money are these people going to owe me, right? So I is the interest. P stands for the principal or the starting amount. Rate is the rate as a percentage, okay? And time is the number. And time is always, the T is years. So remember, I is equal to PRT is the basic calculation that we're working with today. So now, here's our first example for the math that we're going to do today. Now, imagine you purchase a GIC. Remember, that's a guaranteed income certificate. So you know you're going to earn a total of 2.8% simple interest each year. All right. And here's the thing. They tell you if the GIC matures in 6 years. So matures means it stays in the account and then they give you all the interest that you made over the 6 years. How much money interest will you earn in 6 years? Now remember, the interest for simple interest is I is equal to PRT. So let's do the calculation, shall we? So remember, I is equal to PRT. Now the question is, what do we fill in for each of those numbers? Let's go and write our information on the side so we know what we're doing. Now, I, we don't know, so that's our interest, right? And the P is what we call the principal, and that is $2,000, right? Now, remember that our interest has to be changed into a decimal, and our interest in this case is 2.8%. Now, our 2.8% converted into a decimal is 2.8 divided by 100 as we calculated here, which gives us this number, right? And now all we have to do is we have to go and calculate, we have to know the number of years that we have here, okay? Now the number of years that passed by was 6, right? So the number of years that have passed by is 6. So 6 is our T for time. And so now we're about to do our substitution. So now we say P is 2,000, R is 0.28, and T is 6. So we just substitute those directly in. Punching that into your calculator, we end up with I is equal to 336. Therefore, the interest is $336. Now, it says here, the last question that it asks for is, how much money will you get back in total at the end of the investment? In order to do that, all you got to do is this. Just add the starting amount and the interest. In this case, the starting amount was our $2,000 that we had, and the interest we said was $336. So in math, we actually say the amount that we have at the end is equal to the principal plus the interest, which is the starting amount of 2,000 plus 336, which gives us a total amount of $2,336. Now, I'm going to give you an example for which I've done the calculations. Your job is to determine what the final answer is and just check your answer compared to mine, and then your problems are posted online. Now, here is our new problem. All right, so sometimes you get money based on the fact that you have some relative that leaves some money for you, right? So a relative has left you $1,000, Okay, no, let's make it, instead of 1,000, let's make it 10,000. And they left you $10,000 in their will, right? You decide to purchase a Canada Savings Bond. So this Canada Savings Bond is going to give you 1.8% simple interest each year, right? If the bond will mature in 3 years, we need to determine how much money interest you'll earn in 6 years, right? So let's figure out what that is. Remember, I is equal to PRT for the simple interest. So do your math and then check your answer against mine and see if you got that. So just like before, we start with I is equal to PRT. We figure out what our I value is, our starting amount, and we figure out our percentage. Remember, it's always 1.8 or the number divided by 100 to get our R value, which is our interest rate, which is 0.018. And the number of years is the maturity date. So if we say that the maturity date is 3 years, its T is 3. And now we just substitute into our equation. So we have 10,000 times 0.018 times 3, which gives us an interest of $540. Now, in order to find our total amount, we have to just add up the interest and the amount at the end. Sorry, the interest and the amount at the end. Sorry, at the beginning, to get our total amount at the end. All right, so here we go. And so we just add them all up. 10,000 plus 540 is a total of 10,540 that you get when the bond matures, i.e. finishes at the end of 3 years. That's how much money you get, 10,540.